Okay, good morning. Wonderful to see everybody back again. We're up to our next stage in the Jewish lifestyle. Notice that there's really important times in the Jewish life which cluster around certain times. Birth, and there's bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah, but then there's like the next real stage is sort of marriage, and there's like a lot of stuff going on over there. So we're at the next stage. We're moving from engagement to that week before, and the week before now we're at the stage of the Shabbos Kallah and the Aufruf. So there's a lot to talk about here. I want to say a special shout out to Sri Stern, who is sponsoring our series of learning together as we prepare for this. So we get into this idea called an Aufruf, and you say to yourself, well, what does an Aufruf itself actually mean? Like, so we have this practice, but that doesn't sound very biblical, does it? Like the word Aufruf. In fact, it isn't. It is a Yiddish word. And the word Aufruf itself actually means to call up. Aufruf, right? So is a way for. Does anybody know any other terms for it? There are other names for this practice. Does anybody know what they are? It's actually an interesting little Jewish tidbit. Some people call this the Spielhalz. That was what was the Spinnhalz, which was some people say, well, it sounds like actually a spinning party. That doesn't seem to sit right. So some people suggest that I saw about Aryeh Kaplan in his footnotes of his book Made in Heaven says that it means from the word Sheben Alatz, which is a Hebrew word, that Sheben Alatz is the sun is rejoicing, Shvinhalz, which sort of turned into a Yiddishized version of this. You do see these kind of things where you have Yiddish words which are actually really Hebrew words. For instance, one of the famous Jewish expressions of music is klezmer, right? What is klezmer? Klezmer, right? So it's originally a Hebrew word which kind of, became Yiddishized and you forgot where it originally came from. So the Shvinhalz, the Sheben Alatz maybe could have been one of those as well. But be it as it may, it is a practice of the young man, the groom, getting ready for the wedding. Where does this come from? So this comes from, to me, is a very meaningful background. Actually, this is recorded in the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer and is recorded in Maseches Sofrim. A very, very profound practice that used to be at the times of the Beis Hamikdash. So this is why it does go back quite a while, and it describes that when Shlomo Melech constructed the Beis Hamikdash. This goes back therefore to first temple, not the second temple. Okay, so we know that the halacha is, Yechezkel talks about this in the end of Sefer Yechezkel. We actually read the Torah yesterday, was Tetzaveh from Sefer Yechezkel and the Mems, which is where he talks about the Beis Hamikdash. We rarely get to read the Torah on Parshas Tetzaveh because usually it's Zachar. This year as a leap year we got to read it. So in that area in Yechezkel, he describes a practice which is that we enter the Beis Hamikdash in one gate and leave another gate. That's the way that practice is supposed to be. Now, just to clarify that did not mean to say that a person needed to get, from this side of Jerusalem to that side of Jerusalem, so they needed to take a shortcut. That's not allowed. You're not allowed to take a shortcut for the true holy areas. What it means is that when a person enters the precincts of the Beis Hamikdash, you should leave through a different exit. And part of that is not to habituate the experience. So it's not that you're just, I'm used to, this is my place, I talk in the same way I talk in my house, in the Beis Hamikdash. It's meant to be, or that it's new, it means to be you out of sync, but it's also meant to be that you see different aspects of the Beis Hamikdash as well. So in the gates that Shlomo Melech set up, he set up a gate called the Shar Chasanim and the Shar Avelim, where it's described that those who were about to get married or those who are experiencing a loss that week would stand by those gates or sit by those gates, and as people would go in and out to the Beis Hamikdash, they would wish the tidings related to that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who rests his Shekhinah on this place, meaning the house, should give you blessing and should give you Tanchumim, which I think always gives me a very profound perspective of the idea of Hamakom Yanachem Eschem, which is the Ashkenazi practice. It relates to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as the omnipresent. Always very hard word to understand. Where HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the sense of place. But what is interesting about it is it relates to that practice, which is the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mashre His Shekhinah in that place should give you that tiding. That's what seems to be said. And then the Midrash or the Maseches Sofrim carries on to describe Mishecharav Beis Hamikdash, when we no longer have the Beis Hamikdash, Hiskinu Shiyu Hachasanim Va'avelim Boim LeKnesses Kedai Ligmol Lohem Chesed. So when that was destroyed, so what happened is the Migdash Ma'at, the shul, became the place in which we are able to give the chesed to those going through those tidings. Kedelim Olayim Chesed, Chasanim Lekalson, Ulhalvoisam Lebateihem, the grooms to praise them and to escort them to their houses. Avelim lachash yigmar achazan tefillah shel musaf hoilech acharei dalsei shel beis hakneses or bifnei hakneses umoitzo shom avelim v'kol krova v'omer aleim bar bracha v'achakach kaddish. And he describes that after musaf, after the davening on Shabbos, then the community, so to speak, would envelop the avel and make them feel welcome before they would say kaddish. Very beautiful practice. We have that practice when? On Friday night. On Friday night, so that the practice of an avel coming into shul and saying is sort of the vestigial. You say, why should it be then? So the truth is, that's when Friday night davening used to begin. That's when Shabbos was accepted, when people said Mizmor Shir Liyam HaShabbos. All the extra stuff, all that new stuff from 500 years ago, Rav Shlomo Alkabetz and the 6 Mizmorim and Lachadodi, that's great, but that's all like new, right? So we put it at the time that this predated the Tzvat version of Friday night. And so that's where it lives as we welcome in. Ironically for us, by that time it's already late. But in those days, they would start Shabbos earlier. So they would, as the Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbos would be their time of acceptance of Shabbos when it wasn't yet sunset. So that was Tosef Shabbos. That was when they would do it. We're a little more finely tuned to our watching how much time we've been wasting and how much shul is taking our time. But in those days, it would be a much longer process to doing this, and that would be when the Avel would be welcomed, which is actually more technically correct, by the way, because you're not supposed to wish Nichumim on Shabbos in the same way, so that it would be preceding the Shabbos. But nonetheless, this is the way it is, which is, by the way, a very beautiful thing, which means that individual experience is experienced as a community. We always sort of stretch ourselves that it's experienced as a community. I remember it was so profound. Somebody just in the community just went to Israel to bury her parents, and the one thing he said was it was overwhelming how many people came to the funeral and the shiva for a few hours, and he said, the friends I get, he says, but the people who weren't in my immediate group was what was amazing. Is the people who aren't my little cohort, and that's precisely what community is that when you go beyond just your buddies. That's what this is supposed to be. That's what the Beis Hamikdash was, and that's what a shul's meant to be. Is like a bigger grouping, and that's the same thing that the way we experience Simcha as well is supposed to be. Is that when people come together as well. So what do we do at the Aufruf? So the most simple thing, of course, is for the young man who's about to get married to get an aliyah, the Aufruf. So he gets the aliyah in shul, and in fact, if you look at what's called kedima in the aliyah, so if anybody's interested, actually the Art Scroll Siddur has this at the back. It's very helpful. It's based on the Bir Halacha and it's based on a number of practices. But if you're at the back of every Art Scroll Siddur, they do a really great job of summarizing a lot of the halachas. So if anybody's ever wants to spend time doing this, it's really worthwhile looking. And at the back of the Siddur, they have, in the halachas of Kriyas Torah, they have chiyuvim la'aliyah. Who's supposed to get a aliyah? And he gives the source. He quotes the Magen Avraham and Orachaim Simon Resh Pei Beis, so on. And it's a very long list. And the first aleph, number 1, for those gabayim in the room is chasan b'yom chupaso yesh lakedim elakol. So the first is, let's say it is a man is getting married that day. So let's say it is a Monday morning, right? And that day, not a winter day, but that day, a summer day, he's getting married in the evening. He would gets the aliyah before anybody else. And number 2 is chasan b'Shabbos shlifnei chasan nosayim. So it'll be the Shabbos before he gets married. And that is the in the Kedima. Yes. That's based on the Magen Avraham. It's later. Yes, you're right. Yes, exactly. So the Sfaradim do not have this practice, but you'll notice that the Magen Avraham talks about this, and he quoting a lot of the Sifrei Maharil. Ironically, where a lot of these halachas are found. Ironically, are in Hilchos Tisha B'Av as well. Some of them are found in Hilchos Kriyas Torah, and some of them are found in Hilchos Tisha B'Av. Why in Hilchos Tisha B'Av? Because in Tisha B'Av they say, well, how do you celebrate certain things on Shabbos Chazon? That's where it happens to be like a lot of the concentration of the halachos. Are you allowed to wear new clothes? What kind of party are you allowed to have? And it's Shabbos Chazon. Because why is that so important? Is because so many people get married right after Tisha B'Av. And so therefore their Aufruf would be on Shabbos Chazon, if that's the constellation, the way things fall out. That's where the Mariel and the Magen Avraham talk about all these things. So it just happens to be an interesting place, again, sort of that convergence of Velos and Simcha. But yes, it is a later day practice, and it's based on a lot of Ashkenazic practice, seems to be where it comes from as well. Why should a chassan get an aliyah? So there are many interesting practices, but I came across a very, very beautiful observation in the Midrash Talpios. This is a Midrash. It's a sefer which was written about 600 years ago, based on it seems earlier sources. And listen to this observation. It's on page 3, the top of the page. It says Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer Havio Yalkut in the Shoftim. He says Hachassan Domeh leMelech. Says this is the old script because this is the only version I found. It says a chatan is similar to a king. Ma melech makal sinasai av chasan calls yumei shivas mishteh. So you praise a groom just like you praise a king. Ma melech lavush bigdei kavod av chasan kain. He wears clothing of honor. Ma melech mishteh v'simcha lefonav kol hayamim. It goes through all these things. Look at the next paragraph. And it goes on and on and on. But in the middle of it, it says, Ma melech pasech yado letzedaka av chasan kain. Person should give charity like a king. Ma chasan kosev beis sifrei Torah. A king is expected to write 2 sifrei Torah. Says chasan noagim lekros lesefer Torah beis pa'amim chad b'Shabbos kodem achupa v'chad b'Shabbos la'achar achupa. Is that interesting? So there's this notion of writing 2 sefer Torah. Now, a regular person is supposed to write a sefer Torah in their life. If a person has this chus to be able to do this, but a king has to have 2. Now you say to yourself, why 2? Is that excessive? Why does he have to have 2? So the one is he has, but the other one he carries with him the whole time, and it's because, in a certain sense, it relates to power. Right? It relates to power is that a king has so many powers. You have to make sure that to regulate those powers, people get corrupted by power. And if you think about this, sort of like the headiness, the overwhelmingness of getting married on both sides, it's people can get lost in when they get married. In terms of just all the freeness, the newness, all the things, and it's like, no, this is supposed to be also regulated. This is a spiritual experience. This is not just, not just a physical experience. This is meant to be something which you're got your head on straight. This is based on Torah ideas, and if it starts in such a spiritual place, it's not going to just be a physical relationship as well. So it's sort of, if you think about that, before and afterwards is started with the Torah being there as well. There are those who also say that that's what Reb Leibel Eger says, is that let's start our relationships on a spiritual note. Let it be something. And when you bring a person to shul and they have to get in the aliyah, and sometimes today we do the Haftarah, and a chassan has to learn an Haftarah. It's sort of, there's a spiritual dimension in their preparations, not just figuring out what color, how to tie a bow tie. There's
that practice seems to be drifting away.
Yeah, I know. Yes, but the truth is actually, if you look at the earlier sources, it should be really the third aliyah. Interestingly enough, more than that. So the practice of Torah, I don't think is the most consequential, but it is a nice idea to be able to do this as well. Now the candy business. You say what's the deal with this? Are we trying to kill him? Second bar mitzvah. What are we like? Why the candy? So the truth is actually there is an interesting background to this. The Gemara describes in a few places, like the Gemara in Brachos describes, mamshichin yain betzinaros lifnei chassan v'lifnei Kallah. They would sort of draw the wine through the pipes. I think they'd draw up the wine to be able to serve it before the groom and the bride. V'zarkim lifnei kilayos ve'egozim v'moisachama, and they would throw in front of them these roasted nuts roasted grain and nuts during the summer. Not during the rain season. Why? Because it's muddy. There's no, and the shul, the street wasn't like anything had floors like we have them today. And then you can't throw loaves of bread. You can't throw perishable food at them during these seasons as well. And Rashi explains this is a siman tov. It's a sign of good mazel. Ve'ein kam mishum bizayon vehefsed lefishim mekabel mosa berosh pia tzino rekli. They would capture the wine as well. And this was the custom. The Mishnah in Ksubos describes that this is the custom to throw these things. There's lots of Kabbalistic ideas behind this as well. Wine and roasted nuts, and then people start going into the gematria of egos, right? And then egos is sin and throwing down the sin, or maybe it's also the gematria of tov. There's a lot of interesting things that there's all the Kabbalistic, the Ben Yoyada, the Ben Ishchai over here. And this Gemara waxes poetic about ideas about Zachar and Nekeva and the communion. A lot of very interesting ideas that relates to this. So this seems to be the practice. Now today we don't do that. Although they call the stall "Oh Nuts," right? Let's be honest. That's not what they're selling. So today it's candies and it's all kinds of other things, and it's seen as a siman bracha. It's also seen as a siman bracha that the children collect them as well. So the children come to the center of the shul around this, and part of it is also seen as that Be'ezras Hashem, there should be a fruitful relationship. There should be many children in their lives. There's a lot of interesting things that surround this practice as well, and so it's not just a nonsensical relationship as well. So there's a few other things which happen on Shabbos as well, which are worthwhile, and that is the escort. Most people are not aware of this, but there is a special minhag that the chassan should be escorted to shul. That was part of, if you remember that Masechah Sofrim is the escort. It was actually describing back from shul, but there is a minhag to escort the groom to shul with song, actually. So I don't know if anybody's ever seen this. With song. I don't know if anybody's seen it. It's a very beautiful practice. Yes, it's a very beautiful practice. When I was in Eretz Yisrael, the people used to have the Aufruf in yeshiva. It was very, very beautiful. The Shabbos before, and the Bachrim, all the friends would go to the room of the chassan, 10 minutes before davening, and they would sing a slow song with them, like a happy but a slow song, as they walked into the Beis Medrash. It was a very, very beautiful practice. Oh yeah, it wasn't just like a party and so on. It was really a very special thing, and some people have that practice as well. If anybody who's ever seen that and been in that context, it's a very, very beautiful thing. Question is what about wearing a talis? So it's an interesting thing, because in, let's say, Yekish and Sephardic practice, anyway, before wedding, the young men from the age of 13 wear a talis, right? So that being the case, that's not even a question. But for Ashkenazim, a young man doesn't wear a talis beforehand. So he should wear a talis for the aliyah. But there's a whole discussion, it's just interesting tangent in halacha, is as to whose talis should he wear, because by that time he's probably got a talis. But the recommendation is that he doesn't bring his own talis, because if he brings his own talis, he would say a bracha. You can only say a bracha if it's your own talis. So he should take a talis she'ula, borrow friends or the Beis Knesses, and intend not to acquire it, so he doesn't say a bracha. Just interesting observation as well. There's an interesting discussion in general, for the men who are aware over here, is what happens if you take a talis of the shul, do you say a bracha? It seems from the earlier practice that they were donated to the shul with the intent of it being the person who uses it to say the bracha. But today that's not the practice. You notice that? Most people, they borrow a talis of the shul, do not say a bracha on it. We assume that it's not fully their property. To be able to do that, therefore they don't say a bracha. So that should be the case with the chassan as well. And they also say that they should not put it over his head. That would be a practice post-marriage, but not yet. Now, he could put over his head for protection from projectiles later, but not during the aliyah itself. What happens if the Shabbos before the wedding is not possible to be done as the Aufruf? And this happens a lot of times. Right? Let's say that you're coming from a faraway city, and the wedding's on a Sunday, and you have to be staying somewhere else. So actually, we just had a very beautiful thing in our shul. Last Shabbos, we had an Aufruf from a family from LA. And they didn't do this. They made their Aufruf here. Part of it was because the boys' 45 friends from YU happened to also be on the East Coast, and it's in session. It's during yeshiva, so they were all here. It was very, very beautiful, and they made their Aufruf away. But it's hard to do that. It's hard to be the host when you're the guest. So it's a hard thing to do this kind of that arrangement. So in this case, the Magen Avraham actually talks about this, and he says then really it's completely all right to do the Aufruf the week before. and to make the whole simcha and so on. And it's not necessary to be able to do anything special. You can take another aliyah as well. You don't need to make the whole thing, because it's meant to be, in a certain sense, that a person is subsumed in their community, but their community is somewhere else. So let it be with their community. That's the point of it. Let them be surrounded by a community. So that sometimes is the practice, depending on how it works as well, and also in circumstances where, let's say, a wedding is pushed off. So you remember during COVID, like it was crazy, right? You remember how it was? It would be like, sometimes you get a call in the morning, it's like, they're getting married today. Right? It was so crazy. So let's say that they'd planned to have the wedding, and they had their socially distanced Aufruf or whatever it was, on a certain day, and it just wasn't working out. Mom's got COVID. Like, what are you supposed to do? So then it's pushed off another week. So the Magen Avraham says, in such situations, you don't need to redo the Aufruf. It was sufficient. You did it as well. The Monday Aufruf, that's not an Aufruf. That's a nice opportunity for a party, and it's great. It's not an Aufruf, right? That's not, the Aufruf is really meant to be the Aliyah on the Shabbos beforehand. Sometimes you'll have the Memorial Day is the Monday, or the Labor Day Monday, and it'll be convenient to bring the friends in. Sometimes there's people in the family who medically can't get there, like on a Shabbos, and it's just hard. So I'll do the party on it. It's not the Aufruf. It's a nice party. It's a and it's I guess it's the only name we can give it to it. But and people do that, and it's a beautiful party, and it's understandable. But it's not really what we're talking about over here. But it is a nice opportunity to celebrate together and in a different way as well. Now, yeah.
What about doing the offer, like when you do the offer like the week before, not before any specific reason, except like you want to have the Kallah and her family together?
It's a good question. I don't know. I also, it always strikes me as strange. I guess I come from out of town for this, is that when you split up families the day before the wedding, we have dad here and mom there, and I thought it was supposed to be like families together, So if that's the case, I think there's a lot of reason, credit for that, or just to have people together. Like for the Shabbos Kallah, it's nice that dad's around as well, For the Aufruf, it's nice that mom's around. Like it's nice that these things should be read together. But nonetheless, it seems the practice has become more complicated just because of the location and so on. Now, it is interesting that this whole practice actually is not just the Aliyah. There's the bigger part of Shabbos, and the bigger part of Shabbos actually is really the celebration with friends over the course of Shabbos, and this is recognized in Halacha. So there's a sefer called Shulchan HaEzer, and a lot of it's spent talking about marriage. And in the 6th chapter, he describes this idea, what's called a farspiel. Sorry, Rosemary, I think we're out. I don't think we have any. I'm sorry. There's what's called a farspiel, which means this time of joy, and it'd be Shabbos afternoon, and there'd be food and friends and singing and Divrei Torah. That is something which is seen to be a part of this celebration. Yes, sorry.
Is it different if the groom had already been married?
Good question. Yeah. So technically speaking, the chiyuv of the aliyah it drops when it's a second marriage in terms of the chiyuv of the aliyah, but the other aspects of it are still in place as well. So for instance, this aspect of it is the farspiel part is that people, it doesn't have to be, but people coming together and families celebrating the Shabbos beforehand, and there being song and celebration. That seems to be across the board, and that, by the way, is for both the chassan and the kallah. And that means to say is that the aliyah part, that part in shul is chassan related, but the farspiel part of it is clearly for both the guy and the girl. And so if you take a look at on page 4, in the middle of the page, the large print, it says, that is that the friends and the family would go to each of the houses of the groom and the bride and celebrate with them. And that's the Shabbos Kallah, that's the Aufruf meal, so to speak. Now notice, by the way, that the menu is yayin and peiros. There was no 4 courses, there was no color scheme. It was just right, very simple, spending time with each other. And the main point was spending time together. And I often think, by the way, is that sometimes the Aufruf and the Shor Brachos, we'll get there hopefully in a few weeks, but is the most special time is this time, right? If you think about it, because the wedding is so intense, right? It's so fast, it's so intense, you don't really get to spend time with people. And it's the Shabbos afternoon, or sometimes the Friday night even, where you get to spend time with, first of all, friends and family, because how often is the family all together in that way? Number one. But number two is, how often do you get to really spend time with the future mechutanim? Right, and really spend time and sort of just get. Now, sometimes you don't want to, right? So like the less time, better. But let's say everything's working, but you want to spend time, and it's nice to see them in a different environment, and so the ties are loosened and everything is just. And that would be the Shabbos, and that's the Farshpiel, and that's both for the guys and for the girls. It's a very special time to be doing this as well. Sfaradim, by the way, as you pointed out, did not do this. Sfaradim did not have this Aufruf. They don't speak Yiddish, so they did not get this practice. And so it comes to the Shabbat Chatan, which we're going to discuss Be'ezra Hashem later on. The focus is the second one as well. The part I wanted to add over here was about ragging of the groom. So what's become the practice of like just all the roast which happens at these things. So first of all, let's just clarify the point of this whole experience, as is described in that Brisa Masechah Sofrim. If you remember, what was the mission statement? Why did we recreate this in shuls? The way he says, so as to what end? To what end? He says, "Kedei ligmor lahem chesed." In order to do kindness to them. So the point of this is to make it a good experience for them. So I always wondered where how does this work precisely? So you sometimes you'll go to these Aufrufs and they'll be serious roasts. Sometimes you can sort of you want to go lower and lower and lower under the table as you disappear.
I think it's a form of vidui.
I love that limud schos, Baruch. That's the best limud schos I've heard. That's wonderful. Public vidui. This is wonderful. So the truth is that I was looking around for this. I was trying to find if anybody talks about this particular practice and where it comes from and why people are doing this. Found nothing. For a few reasons. The first is that I don't think it is a Jewish practice. So for instance, just as a interesting aside, from the Urban Dictionary, I quote, "The bachelor party may not always be appropriate for younger guys or older relatives. So this is a great way for all the important men in the groom's life to celebrate him by spending the afternoon together and having a little fun at his expense. Public, appropriate, comedic insults, praise, outlandish true stories, and uplifting tributes. The groom knows that it's all fun and is able to be a good sport about it. The groom will be roasted by all those who wish to do it, with the same treatment possibly coming their way too. It's hosted by the groomsmen who pick the theme. The groom will like sports, gaming, poker, and bring everything together with food, drinks, and some good laughs." I believe that that's where the roast of the Aufruf comes from. It's completely a secular and inappropriate practice. And so I would say, so let's be honest about it. It's a Western, secular, inappropriate practice, which has made its way into Judaism. Now let's come back and say, is there a model in Judaism where we talk about such things? So I was thinking about this a little bit, and the answer is yes. Actually, is the question is that tightrope that a person walks is found in the Purim Spiel, if you think about it, right? So there is a discussion that goes around when talking about the Purim Spiel. The Purim Spiel is a time where people are feeling levity, they're feeling happy, and a lot of times in yeshivas or in shuls they would do a spiel, and it'll be a really nice thing. And if done well, is in most incredibly uplifting experience, right? It's very the lyrics, the ideas. There's sometimes the grammar are so creative. In fact, I really highly recommend if anybody has an opportunity to buy Rabbi Feldman's book called "False Facts and True Rumors." It's an excellent rendition on Lashon Hara. And what he does is he not only just summarizes the main points in an excellent way, but he also has an area of application in modern times. So, for instance, he has a section on journalism, internet, social media, checking information, group polarization, cost of speed. He has a lot of really interesting applications today. And in it, he has a section talking about the Purim Spiel. And it's worthwhile noting that the Purim Spiel was something which was a debated topic even in Eastern Europe, in the yeshiva world. So, for instance, it was said that Rav Kook, when he was in the yeshiva in Volozhin was sort of seen as the center of the modern, the newer yeshiva system in the 1800s, post the medieval system, which sort of faded away. So the Volozhin was the mother of all yeshivas before it was closed down by the Russian government. And Rav Kook, all the greats of yesteryear went to Volozhin. So when Rav Kook was there, when he was a Bachar, he did an impression of the Netziv, who was the Netziv around Tzaddi Yehuda Berlin, who was the Rosh Hashiva, or the co-Rosh Hashiva at the time, and he, able to speak in his voice with his accent and his intonation and so on. And it was later on in his life that in his issue of Merkaz HaRav, later on, the great grandson of the Netziv did a spiel on him, and he felt that it was the kapara for his having done that, even though he did it with great care. They say about there's a famous story about a Purim Shvel by Rav Chaim Briska, also at that time the other co-Rosh Hashiva of Volozhin at the later time. They say about the Rav Chaim that there was a time that there was a Bachar who was doing a Purim Shvel about him and was imitating Rav Chaim, mannerisms, where he was saying it in an application, and it was so profound, and Rav Chaim started crying in the middle of the Purim Spiel. So, like you can imagine, the guy on stage must have felt absolutely terrible. Like that's the worst thing you can possibly do, is get Rav Chaim to cry. And so, like, he stopped immediately, and he came over and he apologized. He was distraught, and Rav Chaim, and he said, "I was so sorry. I did not mean to insult the Rosh Hashiva." And Rav Chaim says, "No," he said, "I'm not crying about the insult." He says, "I was crying," he says, "because when I saw how well you were imitating me, I realized that I'm imitating myself most of the time." Isn't that a powerful observation? When you see yourself from the outside, he says, most of the time I'm acting who I want to act like, but I'm not really genuine, authentically myself. Now let us absorb that observation about myself. There's a lot one can learn through these things as well. But nonetheless, throughout the process of this, there were those who were much more concerned about it. So let me give you just two examples. The Oz Nidbaru, Rav Zilber, talks about in the last chelik, in the 14th chelik of his Shalos and Shuvas, and he talks about this, and he quotes the Rambam. The Rambam says that derech schok, that if a person insults another person in a joking manner, it was just a joke, right? He says, where does that fall halachically? So some people say it's avak lashon hara, because it's not really, you didn't say anything. You it was an intimation. It was a hint. Whereas he says no, it's actually, anyway, he is medayik in the Rambam. He says it's actually lashon hara itself, right? I mean, it's biblical lashon hara. It's not just avak lashon hara as well. But more, I say most powerfully is in the words of the Atar LaMelech. Who knows who the Atar LaMelech is? It's a person who most people write their books with their name in it. This is a person who did not want his name in the title of the book because of his humility. Makes a lot of sense, because that's Rav Avram Pam, right? So just this is very much, and the way he writes is the way he was, so gentle, such a refined person. Even the examples he gives after this paragraph are not about bad; they're all about good examples. But nonetheless, he says, "Vuadin." Inyan Amiras Graman. So he's talking about Purim, and he says, people do these Graman, and there's so many beautiful things where you see the word plays on a really good Graman and a really good spiel, unbelievable, unparalleled. When I was in Kerem B'Yavne, the Purim spiel was so profound. These guys made songs out of the most complex of concepts. It was really, really, these were artworks. But nonetheless, he says, Amiras de Graman, Yechola liyos davar no'eh, im ein ma'arichin ba kalos rosh. Ma'arivin ba kalos rosh. If you don't mix into it, levity leitzanus v'kadamer, and this sarcasm. He says, "Da'az ze yotzeh migeder simcha v'nichnas lechlal schok." It enters into the area of levity. Upshita sheyesh li zaher binyanei ben adam lachaver ba'miras hagram. One has to be very careful about what one says about others. The Chalila levayash v'lifkom b'chvod hazulas, God forbid to hurt anybody else. Amesha amrim ba'asasha yesh savrim shemuta ledaber kol ma sheyirtzu b'purim. People say Purim is a license to say whatever you want. V'choshim shekadai hakol moich lemohen b'vadai hakol moich lemohen. Everybody's definitely going to forgive you. It's Purim after all. Ve'ein adon makbid al bizyonos shesavel b'purim. It's all lifted. He says, "Aval man yema shehu kain." Who should say that's the case? Ulai beliboy hu makpid avalahu lo mispayesh legalo sek pakbad. So a person in Hassad is hurt, but they have to laugh about it, because otherwise it wouldn't be the case. That's not the way to do this. And he said that the Chavetz Chaim would say about people, the next thing, he says, Aksil oseh mizahav afar v'achacham oseh me'afar zahav. He said, the Chavetz Chaim used to say that the fool would make out of gold dust, and out of dust gold. So the wise person would make dust into gold, and the fool would make gold into dust. And that's sort of the way that people do it. And that was his observation about Purim as well. And it takes me back to William Shakespeare in King Lear, which says, many a true word hath been spoken in jest. And people say it was just a joke. You're right. But it's very hard to retract that joke and it's to say it. And I always find it amazing at these Aufrufs, because what happens is you have the future father-in-law there and the future brothers-in-law there. And I've walked out of many of these things and forget the fact that there's a rabbi. We've passed that that stage of embarrassment apparently. But I'm like, where I feel uncomfortable being at these things. But like, it's, how could you not be embarrassed as friends to say things that you said about the chassan in front of the future mechutanim? It's like, I've walked out sometimes saying to myself, like, how in the world could you say that? And we create that situation because we want to laugh. So everybody's there waiting to laugh. So we allow these friends to say the most atrocious of things. It's like you're like searching for the most denigrated story. It's not appropriate. It's just not appropriate. That's a bachelor's party. But we're Jews. We're not doing bachelor's parties. We're doing an Aufruf. An Aufruf is to pull a person up. And there's many ways to do it, but there's ways not to do it. And I think it's important to notice that difference. And it's fine to have fun, but we walk that same tightrope on Purim, which is there's beautiful things, there's beautiful ways to make jokes about good things, but we don't have to recount every story which should have been forgotten and embellished in the way that it is. And I think it's so important to appreciate that, especially as we're doing this. And I remember Rav Sobolowski would say, there's no greater opportunity to perform more Isuri D'Oraisa than the Aufruf. He says this to his boys. Because, you're sending these guys in and this is what they're about to do. So it's important to do this, and I think it's important to appreciate this. But it's more than this. I think that, and this is where it comes down to, and this is about the Chassan and the Kallah. And that is the Zohar says the following observation, and I'm going to close this because it's so profound and it affects every week of ours, but especially this week. The Zohar says, quoting in the second Chelek in Daf Peiches, says, Zachar zema Shabbos lekadshay, Rabbi Yitzchak Amar, Ksiv, Vayvarech Elokim es Yom HaShvi, Uksiv, B'man Shisha Yom Til Katuv Yom HaShvi Shabbos Lo Yeh Bo. So on the one hand it says Hashem blessed the seventh day. On the other hand it says Hashem asked us to collect man for 6 days, and on the seventh day not to collect it. It says, how could it be Hashem's giving you blessing, but there's no way to get the blessing because there's nothing to collect, you're not at work. Right, so isn't blessing supposed to be plenty, but I have no way of getting the plenty? Right, so how do I get the plenty that I'm supposed to be blessed with? Like, what's the mechanism to allow that? Asks the Zohar. Very basic question, and the Zohar says the most profound observation. It says, Ela hachi tana. This is how we should understand it. Kol birchin de la'ela v'tahei b'yoma shavia talyan. Any bracha which I'm about to see in the next 6 days are dependent upon that Shabbos beforehand. V'tana amala ishtakach mana b'yom shvi'asa. So why is the manna not found on the seventh day? Mishum da'aruya misbarchi minei kol shisu yomim di'layin. Because that's where the 6 following days are about to receive all the blessing. That's where it's found. Meaning, what happens on Sunday and Monday and all the deals and all the opportunities and all the doors that open, that comes from Shabbos beforehand. Which is why, when we're about to have a very special occasion in life, Shabbos becomes the context in which we celebrate what's about to happen. So it's about to be a wedding, so Shabbos is the time where we prepare spiritually for what's about to happen. And by the way, this takes us back to that the Simchas Bas Neshama Zachar in a certain sense as well, right? This adds another layer to, whenever there's a Simcha in the week, Shabbos becomes the context in which people celebrate it. And it's not just because we're off work and we have time to do it, right? It's also spiritually, that's where all the manna is going to be found as well during the course of the week. And Be'ez Hashem, that's why it is so profound and important. So when thinking about this, there's such a tremendous spiritual element to it, and we should be able to celebrate it in the right way, celebrate it appropriately for both the Chas and both the Kallah for many, many years to come. And for those who've had the opportunity of doing their mezinkas, Be'ez Hashem, you should be able to do it for the next round as well, Be'ez Hashem at the right time. And for those of us who have not yet seen the closing of that loop, we should all be able to have that closing of the loop. Thank you.